think about it. You're constantly kind of sizing people up, trying to figure out their motivations, predicting what they'll do next. Why did that email from your boss sound a little terse? Or why does that new colleague's enthusiasm feel a bit, well, much?
Right.
We're always interpreting this social world around us, and it's this fascinating, often unconscious process we're diving into today.
Exactly. I mean, every single day we're just flooded with social information, aren't we? And our brains have evolved some pretty remarkable strategies for making sense of it all.
Yeah.
This is really the realm of social cognition, how we process, interpret, remember, and, use information in social contexts.
So it's not just about what information we get, but the actual mental machinery we use, the tools for figuring people out.
Precisely. And in this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack some of the core tools and tendencies of our social minds. We're drawing from quite a range of research here. And the goal, really, is to give you a clearer understanding of the fundamental ways we perceive ourselves and others. Maybe offer some aha moments that can, illuminate your own daily interactions and judgments.
I'm definitely ready for some aha moments. So what are these key areas? What's in this mental toolkit we're exploring?
Well, our sources point to several really interconnected areas. We'll kick off with schemas. Think of them as the mental frameworks we use to organize social info.
Schemas. Okay, frameworks. Got it.
Then we'll get into heuristics, those quick mental shortcuts we all rely on.
Great, the shortcuts.
We'll also look at some common errors in our social thinking where things can go a bit wrong. And then how we form perceptions of others, the ways we explain behavior that's attribution, how we piece together our overall impressions, and finally some of the inherent biases that can, shape all of it.
Wow, okay. That sounds comprehensive, like really looking under the hood.
That's the plan. A good look under the hood of our social minds.
All right, let's start with schemas then. Mental frameworks. What exactly are they, and how do they, shape our understanding?
Okay, so think of schemas as these organized packets of knowledge we have stored about the social world. They're built from our past experiences.
Right.
And they contain our expectations, our beliefs about different types of people, social roles, typical events, even ourselves. They really act like cognitive blueprints.
Blueprints?
Yeah, helping us navigate that constant stream of social information.
So if I have a schema for, say, a friendly barista, that would include what I expect them to do, like smile, ask about my day, that sort of thing.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And our sources actually dig into different types of schemas. First up, you've got person schemas.
Okay.
These are about our understanding of individual personalities or, types of people. So you might have a really detailed schema for a specific person, like a close friend.
Sure, all their little quirks.
Right. Or a broader schema for maybe an extrovert based on common characteristics. And often, dominant traits act as anchors for these schemas. What's interesting is that very detailed person schemas can sometimes override the more general expectations we might have.
That makes sense. The more I actually know someone, the less I rely on, a general type.
Exactly. You use the specific information. Then we also have self-schemas.
About ourselves.
Yep. The beliefs and ideas we hold about who we are, these come from our past experiences. They form our self-concept. But what's really fascinating here is how context-dependent they can be.
How so?
Well, you might see yourself as super assertive and competent at work.
Okay.
But maybe more accommodating or even submissive in, say, family discussions. These different self-schemas pop up depending on the situation.
Yeah, okay, that resonates. I definitely feel different, act different, depending on who I'm with or where I am.
Most of us do. Then moving on, there are group schemas. These are off what we call stereotypes.
Ah, right. Stereotypes.
Yeah. These are the schemas we hold about members of specific social groups. Could be based on nationality, religion, profession, you name it.
Okay.
Now, while they can sometimes offer quick generalizations, our sources are pretty clear that they can also lead to really inaccurate judgments and oversimplification. We'll definitely circle back to this when we talk about errors.
Right. Stereotypes feel like a big potential pitfall. Got it. What's next?
We also use role schemas. These are our expectations for people in specific social roles, like a doctor, a teacher, a manager, a cashier. When we first interact with someone in a particular role, our understanding is often guided by these schemas based on the obvious cues, the uniform, the setting.
Sure.
But as we get more individual information about that person, our person schema for them becomes more important. So your first interaction with a new dentist might be all about the dentist role schema.
Right. Drills and white coats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But after a few visits, you start reacting more to their specific personality, their individual traits. That person's schema takes over.
So the more interaction, the more the individual shines through the role.
Precisely. And one last type, event schemas, sometimes called scripts.
Scripts, like in a play.
Sort of. There are mental outlines for the typical sequence of actions in common social situations, like going to a restaurant, the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Wait to be seated, get menus, order, eat, pay.
Right, there's an expected flow.
Exactly. Or attending a meeting, or even, as one source mentions, the typical flow of a classroom lecture in a specific culture. These scripts help us anticipate what's next and how we should behave.
Okay, so schemas are these complex filing systems for the social world, helping us organize, predict. What's the actual impact, though? How do they affect our thinking day to day?
Oh, the impact is profound. Really profound. Firstly, they act as cognitive filters. Think about it. There's so much social information coming at us.
It's overwhelming.
Totally. Schemas help us manage that by directing our attention to what seems most relevant based on our existing expectations. If you have a schema for a gossipy coworker, you're probably more likely to notice and remember when they share rumors.
It's like our brain flags information that fits the existing file. This fits the pattern. Pay attention.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Secondly, schemas are theory-driven. Because they come from our past knowledge, they actively shape how we interpret new situations. We tend to see what we expect to see. Even if the evidence is a bit ambiguous, we might interpret it in a way that confirms our schema. This can lead to confirmation bias, actively looking for evidence that fits.
So my initial idea about someone can actually color how I see everything they do afterward.
Absolutely. It can. Thirdly, schemas have a huge impact on memory. We generally remember information that's consistent with our schemas better than stuff that contradicts them.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, what's more, if there are gaps in our memory, schemas can sometimes fill in those blanks with plausible, schema-consistent details, which might not be what actually happened.
Whoa, so our schemas can kind of rewrite our memories a little bit.
In a way, yeah. They can definitely shape recall. Fourthly, schemas let us make inferences. They allow us to go beyond the information that's right in front of us.
Like connecting the dots.
Exactly. Making assumptions to understand situations and people better. So, if your schema for a fitness enthusiast includes liking healthy food, you might infer your new roommate, who's always at the gym, will want to try that new vegan cafe.
Even if they never said anything about vegan food, you're just filling in based on the type.
Precisely. Fifth, schemas, especially those person schemas, heavily influence our social judgments. They affect our evaluations, positive, negative, and trigger-associated feelings. A negative schema about a certain group or type of person can lead to snap judgments, maybe even negative gut feelings, almost automatically.
So those gut feelings aren't always just random. They could be rooted in these schemas we hold.
Very often, yes.
Yeah.
And finally, a key point. Schemas are integrated and tend to be quite stable, quite resistant to change.
Stable, how?
Well, even activating one small part of a schema can bring the whole network of related beliefs and expectations online. And they show this sort of perseverance. Even when you get information that contradicts the schema tends to hang on.
Wow.
It can be really difficult to update our schemas, even if they're clearly inaccurate. One source talks about the perseverance effect, where initial impressions keep influencing us even after the basis for that impression is totally discredited.
Okay, that explains why it's sometimes so hard to change someone's mind about something or someone. Once that schema is set, it kind of defends itself.
That's a good way to think about it. It has a built-in defense mechanism. Now, schemas give us these frameworks, right? But we also need faster ways to think on our feet.
Yeah, we can't always be analyzing everything through our schemas.
Exactly. And that brings us neatly to heuristics.
Heuristics, right. The mental shortcuts. The brain's quick and dirty tricks for making decisions, you call them.
Yeah, something like that. We tend to use them when we're overloaded with information, maybe under time pressure, or honestly, just when we want to save mental effort.
Which is probably quite often.
Definitely. They let us make judgments quickly, often without consciously digging through all the info. It's about efficiency.
Efficiency over, a deep analysis. So what are the main types?
Our sources highlight a few key ones. First, there's the availability heuristic.
Availability, meaning what's available in my memory.
Exactly. We base judgments on how easily relevant examples come to mind. If you can easily recall instances of something, you tend to think it's more likely or frequent.
Okay, so if I keep hearing news stories about, I don't know, shark attacks, I might start thinking they're really common, even if statistically they're rare.
Precisely. Because those vivid stories are easily available in your memory. And it's not just about the number of examples you recall, but crucially, the ease with which they come to mind. A really dramatic or emotional event sticks.
Yeah, that makes sense. A shocking story grabs you more than a boring statistic. Okay, what's another one?
The representativeness heuristic. This is where we classify something based on how similar it seems to a typical case or a prototype that we have in our head.
Uh-huh.
And we do this even if the actual statistic, the base rates, might point in a different direction.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Say you meet someone who's quiet, wears glasses, loves reading. You might quickly think, probably a librarian.
Right.
Even though there are statistically far more, say, salespeople than librarians, that person seems more representative of your librarian prototype. You focus on the similarity and kind of ignore the base rate info.
Okay, I can definitely see how that could lead to some faulty assumptions, matching the person to my mental picture instead of the odds. What else?
The third big one is the anchoring and adjustment heuristic.
Anchoring and adjustment. Sounds
Yeah.
like sailing.
A bit. The idea is we start with some initial value or number that's the anchor, and then we adjust from there to reach our estimate.
Okay.
But the catch is, we often don't adjust enough. Our final estimate tends to stay too close to the original anchor, even if that anchor was totally random or irrelevant.
Right, like in a negotiation, the first price thrown out sort of sets the stage.
Exactly. That first offer acts as an anchor, heavily influencing where the price eventually lands. Our sources give another example, asking people to estimate something like, say, the population of Delhi.
Okay.
If you first ask them if it's more or less than, say, 2 million, a low anchor, maybe using Haryana's population as a reference like in the source example, they'll give a lower estimate than if you first ask if it's more or less than 30 million, a high anchor. The starting point drags their guess.
Wow. Even if the anchor is just pulled out of thin air.
Yeah. And we even use ourselves as anchors when trying to guess what others think or like.
Yeah. So if I love spicy food, I might guess my friends like it spicier than they actually do because I start from my own preference and don't adjust down enough.
Exactly that. So, these heuristics, incredibly useful for quick thinking in a complex world, no doubt. But because they are shortcuts, they can also lead to systematic errors in our social thinking.
Which seems like the perfect place to go next, errors in social cognition. We try to be logical, right? But it sounds like our brains have these built-in glitches almost.
Well, glitches might be one way to put it, or maybe just consequences of trying to be efficient. Our thinking isn't always as rational as we'd like to believe, especially in the social sphere.
So what causes these errors? Why does our thinking go astray?
There are several factors. One perspective comes from the cognitive experiential self theory. It basically suggests we have two systems, a rational analytical one and an intuitive feeling-based one, the experiential system. And often, especially in social situations, we lean heavily on that intuitive experiential system. We go with our gut feelings, which are based on past experiences, rather than a cool, logical analysis.
Right, like having a bad feeling about someone just because they vaguely remind you of someone you didn't like, even if they haven't done anything wrong.
Exactly. That past emotional echo can cloud your judgment of the present person. Another source of error involves how we handle information that doesn't fit our schemas, paying attention to inconsistent information.
Wait, I thought you said we remember schema-consistent stuff better.
We do, generally. But information that strongly violates a schema, especially a role schema like gender roles, really grabs our attention. It stands out.
Ah, okay. The unexpected catches the eye.
Precisely. And because it grabs our attention, we sometimes remember it better, like the study showed with counter-stereotypical traits. But the error can come if we then give that inconsistent piece of information too much weight when forming our overall impression.
So one unusual action might overshadow a whole pattern of typical behavior just because it was surprising.
It can, yes. Then there's a really powerful one, the negativity bias.
Negativity bias. Sounds like we focus on the bad stuff.
That's exactly it. We tend to give negative information much more psychological weight than positive information of equal intensity. One critical comment can often hurt more or stick longer than several compliments.
Yeah, I think we all feel that. It takes way more positive things to balance out one negative thing. Why is that?
Evolutionarily, perhaps being highly attuned to potential threats or dangers was more crucial for survival than noticing every positive thing.
Yeah.
So bad news just registers more strongly.
Like a built-in alarm system that's extra sensitive. Okay, what else trips us up?
The planning fallacy. Oh, this one is relatable for many of us.
Uh-oh. Tell me more.
It's our consistent tendency to underestimate how long it will take to finish a task or how many resources we'll need.
Guilty as charged.
We tend to focus on the future, optimistic scenario. I'll just power through it.
Yeah.
And we conveniently forget all the past times similar tasks took way longer.
Right. And even if someone reminds you, remember last time, you think, but that was different because of X, Y, Z.
Exactly. We attribute past delays to external unique factors rather than seeing a pattern in our own planning optimism or maybe lack of realism.
The eternal struggle. Okay, what else?
Well, somewhat counterintuitively, there's the potential cost of thinking too much.
Wait, thinking too much can be bad. Isn't analysis good?
You'd think so, always. But some studies suggest that when it comes to things like personal preferences, what jam you like best, which poster you prefer over analyzing why you like something, can actually lead you to make choices you're less happy with later.
Ow.
It seems like analyzing can sometimes disconnect you from your initial gut feeling or holistic impression. The study with jam ratings found that people who just rated intuitively were closer to expert ratings than those who had to list reasons for their preferences.
That's wild. So sometimes going with your gut feeling, at least for preferences, might be better than dissecting it.
It seems possible in some contexts, yeah. Then we have counterfactual thinking.
Counterfactual, like against the facts.
Exactly. It's thinking about how things could have turned out differently. The what-ifs, the if-onlys.
Ah, yeah. Ruminating on past mistakes or near misses.
Right. It can be useful for learning, if only I'd studied harder, I would have passed. But it can also lead to a lot of regret, frustration, blaming ourselves or others, especially when we imagine upward counterfactuals, how things could have been better.
If only I'd left 5 minutes earlier. Yeah, I know that feeling.
We all do. And finally, the sources mention magical thinking. This involves beliefs that defy logic.
Magical thinking, like superstition.
Kind of. It includes things based on the law of similarity. The idea that things that look alike share fundamental properties, like, refusing to eat a chocolate shaped like a spider, even though you know it's just chocolate.
Ah, okay. Yeah, the shape makes it feel
Wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the law of contagion, the belief that properties can be transferred through contact, even brief or indirect contact, like feeling uncomfortable wearing clothes previously worn by someone you dislike, even after they've been thoroughly cleaned.
Right, like their essence is still there somehow.
Precisely. It's not rational, but these feelings can be quite powerful.
Wow. Okay, so schemas, heuristics, and then all these potential pitfalls, negativity bias, planning fallacy, even thinking too much, counterfactuals, magical thinking. It's a lot going on under the surface when we interact with the world.
It really is. Our social lines are incredibly complex, constantly working, interpreting, judging, often using these shortcuts and frameworks without us even realizing it.
So, wrapping this part up, what are the big takeaways for you, our listener, from this journey through schemas, heuristics, and errors?
I think the main takeaway is just how actively we construct our social reality. It's not like we're just passively receiving information. We're filtering it through schemas, taking shortcuts with heuristics, and we're susceptible to these various biases and errors.
It's not an objective photograph. It's more like an interpretation or a painting.
That's a great analogy.
Yep.
And recognizing these processes, schemas, heuristics, biases, is really the first step toward understanding why we see the social world and the people in it the way we do.
It's like getting a peek at the user manual for our own social brain.
Exactly. And with that awareness, you can start to reflect more consciously. You can ask yourself, what schemas might I be using right now? Am I relying on a heuristic? Could negativity bias be coloring my judgment here? Is the planning fallacy about to bite me again?
So it's about developing a kind of meta-awareness, thinking about our own thinking.
Precisely. That metacognitive step. When you catch yourself making a snap judgment or having a really strong gut reaction, pause for a second. Consider what might be driving it. Is it a well-worn schema? Is it the availability heuristic? Could an error be creeping in?
And hopefully that pause, that awareness can lead to more mindful interactions, more balanced judgments.
That's the potential benefit. Absolutely. It's not about eliminating schemas or heuristics and need them, but it's about using them more wisely, recognizing their limits, and being aware of the potential for error. It's about becoming a more mindful observer of your own mind in action within the social world.
That's a really powerful thought to end on, becoming a more mindful observer of our own minds. Thanks so much for walking us through all of that. It's certainly given me, and hopefully you listening, a lot to think about regarding how we navigate our social lives.